Hello everyone. Welcome to yet another YouTube live workshop from Hack This Fall. I'm super excited to be starting this new week with interesting topic, to delve in. But at the same time, I am also quite looking forward to the hackathon, which is super close, and I believe in next 2 weeks or so. The time is running, and I'm quite excited and can't wait for it to happen. But everyone in the chat, hello and welcome to this one. Let us know where you are joining in from in case you're joining live. In case you'll be watching the recording later, feel free to comment below and let us know where you are watching this from. But at the same time, I know we have been talking about a bunch of topics. We did some lightning talks in the beginning about hackathon projects, about career building, some Twitter spaces, and a lot many other things as well. From past week we have started to talk more about the products or the companies that you'll be interacting with at Hack This Fall. And I mean, it's really very essential for a hacker to understand the mindset behind any technology while they are working or they are planning to work on such projects during the hackathon. And that is why we have come up with yet another interesting workshop from one of our sponsors, Vonage here. The title is Supercharge Your Hack with Web APIs, and essentially you'll learn how to manage or leverage web APIs to kind of maximize the time you have to build your projects, because essentially at a hackathon the time is kind of a constraint because it's like a 36 hours limited duration hackathon and you have to build the projects out of it. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun to understand new product, to learn something new. If you are already aware of Vonage or have used it before, let us know in the chat as well. And yeah, that would be awesome to know. But without further uh, taking any of your time, let me quickly invite onto the stage our speaker for the day, Carl. Welcome.
Thanks, Sid. Thanks for the intro. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session. As Sid mentioned, today we're going to talk about web APIs. I don't know, can everyone see is the screen shared there, Sid? Or
Oh, yes, let me quickly bring that up. Here you go.
okay, brilliant. Thank you. Today we're going to talk about web APIs. We're going to talk about why they're great, how you can use them to build an amazing hackathon project. So just to give you a bit of background before we start, my name's Karl. I'm a developer advocate at Vonage. Vonage provides communication APIs that let developers integrate things like messaging, voice, video, two-factor authentication, and a bunch of other things into their applications. Since I work for an API company, I guess it's not surprising for me to say that I think web APIs are awesome, but I don't just want you to take my word for it. During this session, we're going to look at why web APIs are so useful when developing applications, and in particular, why you might want to use web APIs when building your hackathon project. So hackathons are a lot of fun, right? You get to hang out with a bunch of other developers, you get to work on exciting new technologies, you get to build something cool. Building a hackathon project isn't without its challenges, though. And the biggest of these is probably time. At the start of a hackathon, you're excited, you have a great idea for your project, you want to build something great, but the clock is always ticking. And to have a successful hackathon, one of the most important things you can do is to maximize the time that you have available. So how do you do that? Well, there's a number of things you can do. First of all, be realistic. Everyone wants to build something amazing. But given the time constraints, something sometimes good is good enough. So you need to be realistic about what you can achieve in the time that you have available. Secondly, make a plan. The start of a hackathon can be really exciting, and maybe you want to just dive straight in and start building. But to maximize the time that you have, you need a clear plan of what needs doing, and that you can then subdivide into tasks, and you can assign those tasks to different team members. And that brings me to another point, which is to work as a team. So everyone on the team is going to have different strengths and weaknesses. So try and assign tasks appropriately, try not to duplicate work, and work together as a team. And when you work together as a team, a key aspect of doing that is communication. So even if you're working on an individual task, make sure that you check in regularly with your teammates, make sure that everything stays on track, and so on. Another part of that is asking for help. So If you get stuck, don't just spend hours trying to figure it out by yourself. Someone else in your team might know the solution, or even just talking it through with somebody can really help to figure out a bug or an issue that you're having. And finally, a really important one here is self-care. So you might feel the urge to just spend every second coding during the hackathon, but it's really important to make sure that you take the time out to rest, eat, hydrate. If you're tired and hungry, you won't be working at your most effective. So not stopping for regular breaks is ultimately going to be counterproductive. So these are all pretty useful strategies for maximizing time during a hackathon, but there's another thing that you can do to make the most of your time and really supercharge your hackathon projects, and that's to use web APIs. So in the rest of this presentation, we're going to look at exactly how you can do that. First of all, though, let's just really quickly cover what web APIs are and why they're useful. So what is a web API? If we break down the term into its individual parts, an API is an application programming interface. So in other words, it's a way for applications or programs to communicate with each other. And the web is essentially this kind of huge information system that we access via the internet. So putting these two terms back together then, web APIs are APIs that we use over the web. So when we think of the web, we often think of it as something for human consumption, right? We think of something that, we use to read a blog post or a news article or listen to some music or watch a movie or a video, do some shopping, online banking, or like 1,000,001 other things that you might do via the web. So these activities all involve a person interacting with data via the web. But there's another web as well as this web that's used by humans. And that's the web of web APIs. And this is a web that's used by applications. So what can you do with web APIs? Well, pretty much anything that you can think of, really. There are APIs for mapping services like Google Maps, APIs for weather information like AccuWeather, e-commerce APIs like Shopify, online payments like Stripe, and of course communications APIs like Vonage. And this is just scratching the surface. There's a ton of other ones that I haven't listed here that you can do pretty much anything that you can think of with. If there's some type of service or functionality that you want to integrate into your applications, there's probably a web API that you can do it with. And if you were to try and build the sort of functionality that these web APIs provide, it would be extremely complex and take weeks or months of work. But by integrating with a web API, you can add that functionality to your application in minutes. So now that we've covered what web APIs are and why you might want to use them, let's look at how to use them. At a fundamental level, using a web API is about making an HTTP request and then handling the HTTP response. So the HTTP request is made by your application to a specific endpoint. In the case of like AccuWeather, for example, you could send a GET request for weather information for a specific location, and then the endpoint returns an HTTP response, which will probably include some data in the body of the response. Again, in the case of our example of AccuWeather, it include weather data for the location that you've requested. And then you can then use that, or your application can then use that data. So some languages have built-in HTTP client functionality. With others, you might need to use an external library. It really depends on the programming language that you're using. But essentially, this is what your application needs to do. It needs to send an HTTP request and handle the response. So this is an example of what an HTTP request to a web API might look like. We're sending an HTTP request to this theoretical greeting API, asking for a random greeting, and then we get a response back with a greeting, which our application can then use. So this is kind of a bit of a silly, simple example, but hopefully it gives you an idea of the kind of request response cycle that you'd use with a web API. So I kind of mentioned data there, and that's a really important part of web API functionality. Data will be included in either the HTTP request or in the response, or possibly both. And this is the means that your application uses to communicate with the web API. And In order for applications to communicate with each other, they need a common language. And in the case of most web APIs, that language is JSON or JavaScript object notation. So to send a request to a web API asking it to do something, the body of the request will need to be in JSON format. And similarly, any response body that the web API sends back will be in JSON. So this is for most web APIs. That there are exceptions to this that use older APIs, maybe use XML or some other languages, but the majority of web APIs that you're dealing with these days use JSON. So this is an example of a JSON object. It's very similar to a JavaScript object. It has properties and there's property values. And you can have different property types. But essentially, this is kind of what a JSON body would look like. The important thing, though, is that for your application to use it, or for you to use that data in the application, you need to then transform it to and from JSON from the application language that you're using a process called serialization and deserialization. So again, the exact way that you do this will depend on the programming language that you're using. Some languages have built-in JSON parsing functionality. With others, again, you'll have to maybe use an external library. And this is an example here of serializing and deserializing data between Ruby and JSON, but this applies to kind of any programming language that you would use. So that's it pretty much. At a basic level, in order to use a web API, you need to send an HTTP request and handle a response, and you need to serialize and deserialize data to and from JSON. There are other details that will vary from API to API, such as which headers you need to set on the request, what kind of authentication you need, and so on, and lots of other details. But at a fundamental level, you'll always need to perform these two basic steps. If you want to use a specific web API, though, where's the best place to start? So in my opinion, the best place to start is always with the documentation. So there are different types of API documentation. For example, the API specification, things like user guides, tutorials, code snippets, and so on. The API spec will tell you things like how the API is structured. This will include things like the endpoints, which consist of an HTTP method and a URI. The API spec will also tell you the expected JSON structure of the request body or the types of responses that you can receive, including things like error responses. And it will also tell you the kind of authentication scheme that you need to use. Then you have things like user guides and tutorials. And these are documentation that take you step by step through performing like a particular action with the API or demonstrating a specific use case. Another type of documentation is code snippets, and these show you how to make specific types of API requests to the web API, and these are often shown in multiple languages, which generally tend to demonstrate the use of an SDK, and we'll look at SDKs shortly. Another thing I quickly want to mention here is when you're first exploring a new web API, it can be really useful to explore it by making some requests to it without having to write any code. So there are various tools that you can use to do this, and one tool that I really like is Postman. So be sure to check that out. So I mentioned SDKs. SDKs, or software development kits, are code libraries that you can include in your application in order to interact with the web API. So instead of having to make your application having to make an HTTP request and handle a response directly and serialize and deserialize the data to and from JSON, you can instead make a method call using the SDK, and the SDK will then deal with all those kind of low-level details for you. So SDKs usually handle things like setting request headers, creating JWTs for authentication, as well as kind of handling the requests and responses and serializing and deserializing data for you. Most web API providers will have SDKs in multiple programming languages, so you can use the one that you're most suited to the language that you're using. And in the same way that web APIs can save you time by integrating complex functionality into your application, SDKs can also save you time by simplifying the way that you use the web API. Okay, so hopefully that's given you an understanding of what web APIs are. and a little bit of information about how to do them at a fundamental level. Now I want to kind of just demonstrate making some actual API requests. For the demo, I'm going to use a few different Vonage communications APIs, and I'll be using the Vonage Node SDA to do that. What I'll do is first demonstrate some usage with a sample app that I've built, and then briefly walk through the code. So give me 1 second here just to get set up off screen. Okay. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. So I'm just going to make that slightly smaller. Just want to connect up my phone. Okay, so this is a demo showing various Vonage communications APIs. There's 3 APIs I'm going to demo today. One is the messages API, which allows you to send messages across different channels. I'm going to show a couple of those channels, SMS and WhatsApp. Then there's a voice API, which allows you to make voice calls and manage voice calls. And then we've got a video API as well. So let's have a look at SMS first. This is just a kind of simple form. This app is built in Node using Express.js. So this is kind of simple form in the Express app. I'm just going to put in my number. Sorry, 1 second. And type message, hello from this call, and send that. And hopefully that should come through on my phone. Yeah, so I've got so what that message coming through is an SMS on my phone. Similarly with WhatsApp, we can do the same sort of thing. And I've got WhatsApp message here in the same way. Then we can make a voice call. So I'm going to make a voice call to my phone and then play some text to speech into it. So the text I'm typing out here is going to be converted to text to speech.
This is a voice call from Hack This Fall using the Vonage Voice API.
So that was a voice call. And then, give me 1 sec. I'm just going to do a video call. So I'm going to start a video call here. And then copy this link. I'm just going to WhatsApp that link to myself. So let me just mute that. Okay, so now I've got a video call working, so like a video call running in my browser that I'm also running on my phone. So I've got a video communication call between my browser and my phone. So that is the demo. Let me just walk through the code real quick. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is a Node app built with Express.js. So it's a pretty standard Express app. Let me just make this a bit bigger. Yeah, so I won't run through all of the files, but we've got a bunch of views here. So for example, this is like the view for the SMS form. It's just a standard form in HTML. Then we have some routes, again, SMS routes. So this is the route to show the form. And then when the form gets submitted, it goes to this create route, which fires off this create controller. And then this is the create controller for the SMS form. So it receives the form data. And then what we're doing here is creating a Vonage client object using an application ID and private key. So these are the credentials that you need to authenticate with the Vonage servers. And then we're calling a send method and passing in an SMS object, which takes some data from the form. So the message that we typed in, the number, and then the Vonage virtual number here is the number we're sending from, which is the number I've got set up in my Vonage account. And that's basically all there is to sending an SMS with the Vonage Node SDK. Similarly with WhatsApp, very similar thing. We take data from the form, we pass it into this send, which is this WhatsApp text object, which we pass into this send method. There's a slight difference in setup because we're using the messages sandbox, which I won't go into too much detail about now. Voice, again, it's a similar kind of thing. We're just calling a single method, passing in some data, like the to number, the from number. This action here is what we want to do with the voice call. With creating a talk action when passing in the text from our form, which is converted to text to speech. So again, kind of really simple, just kind of 12 lines of code or 14 lines of code here. We'll create a voice call and place some text into it. The video is a little bit more complicated and there's some more setup. You have to do some stuff on the back end here and create a video call using the credentials and then things like creating sessions, generating a token for the client, and then there's a bunch of stuff you have to do on the front end. In where is it? The video. Using a front end library that you plug into. It's not that complicated, really, but it's a bit more complicated than some of the other APIs. It takes a little bit more setup. So that's pretty much it for the code walkthrough. Let me go back to my presentation. Okay, so it's almost time to wrap things up. Hopefully this has been a good starting point on your journey for using web APIs. There's a couple of final points I want to make. Don't be afraid to try things out. If you see web API that looks interesting and could be useful for your hackathon project, dive in and check it out. And most importantly is to it's to have fun. So enjoy working with web APIs, enjoy working on your hackathon project, enjoy checking new things out. So one final thing I want to mention is Vonage is supporting one of the Hack This Fall challenges, which is to build something using Vonage APIs that will be good for planet Earth. So if you decide to do this challenge or you decide to use Vonage APIs for any other challenge, feel free to reach out and ask questions. There's some more details about the Vonage challenge on this link. I will be sharing the link in the Discord, so don't worry about that if you can't make a note of it just now. Um, yeah, and speaking of questions, I think we have a little bit of time, like 5 minutes left here. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the chat. If not, you can also ask in Discord. We've got a Discord channel, Vonage at Hack This Ball. So ask in there over the coming days. If you've got any questions about Vonage APIs or using web APIs generally. Also, if you're going to be at the live event, come and see us at the Vonage booth. We'll be happy to answer questions there. We also have swag, a prize giveaway, and there'll be a bunch of other fun stuff. So yeah, so that's the end of the session. Does anyone have any questions at all?
Awesome. Thanks, Karl, for that wonderful walkthrough on the workshop and how we can use Vonage APIs all in all at the hackathon. I am hoping if someone can ask questions that we can pick up right now. Other than that, as Karl mentioned, you can always reach out in the Vonage at HTF channel on Discord. He is already there and he can help you answer all of those questions. I see one comment here from Aveen. He says, "Love how smooth the demo was, no hiccups at all." Of course, I think it's definitely going to be wonderful if you're trying using Vonage in your hacks at Hack This World. And I know Karl is joining us in person, so if this was such a smooth of a demo in virtual mode, I'm sure it will be even more smoother when it comes in person, right?
Yeah, it doesn't
So-
always work smoothly, but yeah, luckily today it was a smooth. I think there's a question I see from Tukir. I'm a
Oh,
bit new
yes.
to API integrations. Can we create some new features other than the demo ones? Yeah, the demo ones were just a few examples of some of our main APIs, but there's other functionalities within those APIs. So with the voice one, for example, I created a voice call and played some text to speech, but there's a bunch of other things you can do with voice. Again, with messages, I demoed SMS and WhatsApp, but there's other channels as well. There, yeah, and there's other APIs that I didn't demo today, like 2FA, like Number Insight, and a bunch of other management APIs that we have. Yeah, so there's lots of things you can do with Vonage APIs, and also there's a million and one other APIs as well that you can use for your hackathon projects. But I would say use Vonage ones because they're great. But yeah, there's pretty much anything you can think of in terms of functionality you want to integrate into your projects. There's probably an API out there that you can do it with. You'll be trying communications APIs, sure. Thanks, Tukir. Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, if you're at the event, come and say hi at the booth. And if you need any, if you have any questions about how to use the APIs, we'll be happy to answer those.
Yeah, absolutely. I do not see any further questions as of now, but as mentioned, you can always reach out in the HTF or Vonage at HTF channel on the Discord, and Karl is always keeping an eye over there. Perfect. Thank you so much, Karl, for your time. I'm looking forward to how things goes and how people use the Vonage APIs in their hacks.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sid. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, I see one question before we actually wrap up. Sorry. Vinayak is asking, he was just going through the two-factor authentication API. So is it just limited to Ruby applications is what he's asking.
No, you can build in any language you want. So the API itself is language agnostic. So you just need to be able to send HTTP requests and handle the responses. So you can do that in any language. We have SDKs in a number of different languages, though. So as I said, the SDK simplify the use of the API. And we have those for the demo, I was using our Node SDK, our Node Server SDK, but we also have like PHP, Python, Ruby, Java, and a .NET SDK written in C#. So you can use any of those. But you don't have to. You're not limited to just those languages. If you want to build your own wrappers around the API using a completely different language, you can do that as well. It's a little bit more complicated, but you're not limited to a specific language.
Awesome, perfect. And for more further queries on the challenge and everything, you can always head over to this link. You can find every detail, the prizes, how to redeem those, the eligibility guidelines, and everything else as well. So feel free to explore that while we are wrapping up this particular workshop. But yeah, thanks, Karl, once again. I am looking forward to seeing you and meeting you in person as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sid. Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Awesome. Well, thanks for following up and staying with us so far. In case you're stuck somewhere, feel free to just rewind this particular video. The recording will be live up on our YouTube right after this ends. And do not hesitate in reaching out to Karl on Discord, or if you have any questions, we'll be present in person as well on their booth. So they'll be more than happy to help you out in any of the case. Well, with that being said, I'll see you on Thursday, which is also our last live workshop from Ocus. And yeah, then we'll be wrapping up the virtual mode and we'll be, kind of getting prepared for the in-person setting. Yeah, thank you so much everyone for tuning in and see you all soon. Take care. Bye bye.